And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Cable. Chapters is the television show that profiles local authors, editors, and publishers in our community. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. This week's episode comes to you from Empire Books and News at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. And on this episode of Chapters, we're going to focus on the genre of political memoir. And the focus of our discussion today is going to be on the book titled Deception on Conception, What Happened in Grenada from 1962 to 1990, authored by Teddy Victor. And we should point out before we begin our interview that Mr. Victor is deceased, but here to talk to us about the book and who was really the person that got this book collected and got it started is his sister, Barbara Pursoo. And she's our guest today here on Chapters to talk about Deception on Conception. Barbara, welcome to Chapters. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit first about how you got into putting this book together. This book is a story about your brother's experiences in Grenada during this time period of 1962 to 1990. But how did you get involved in this project of collecting this information and getting the book put together?
Well, my brother always wrote. There was always bits of paper around the house that he wrote on. And once he passed in 2008, his wife called and said that he left lots of stuff that we needed to go through, and that there was a manuscript. And so I said, get me a copy and I'll look through it. And actually I sat on it for probably maybe 5 years because I could tell there was stuff missing. So it was until my nephew went back to Grenada for Christmas. He brought all that he could find, all his binders with stuff. And as I went through it, I could find stuff that's missing. And so I decided to make sure the missing stuff is included.
How long did it take you to go back through those binders and decide this was missing, this needed to be added from the time you decided to look at those? How long was the process?
It actually was not a long process because the introduction was missing. And I know my brother very well. He would write an introduction. And then there was a couple of people who were, very good friends who, died during the revolution, and I know he would not write a book and not include or mention them. So it was more a search for the names of these people and to make sure that they were included in the book. And once I found it, I knew this was what was missing. There was a couple letters from my mom, and so a couple things missing were critical to really making the book a really complete memoir. That's what I would have to say, yes.
Okay. Now, for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with this part of the world, where is Grenada itself? Where's it located, sort of in the world sphere or in the hemisphere? And what countries are surrounding Grenada?
Okay. Well, we're as far south in the Caribbean as you could get. We're probably about 100 miles north of Trinidad and Tobago. So we're actually closer to South America than to the northern part of the Caribbean. So we're close to Trinidad, close to Venezuela, close to Tobago, and to the north there is St. Vincent.
Okay. So it's definitely a Caribbean flavor to your island.
Right, definitely.
I wanted to ask you something that is mentioned at the beginning of the introduction, or just past the forward in the introduction of your book, and I think it ties right into giving some geographical location about your book, but also some history about the country of Grenada. And the book starts out with this. The little island of 133 square miles and 90,000 people has created more headlines than many countries 100 times its size. And I think that's such a great way and a powerful way to open the book. Why is that? Why is this little island of 133 square miles? How and why has it generated more headlines over the years than most countries that are twice its size?
Well, I guess we'd have to go all the way back. We were not really discovered by Columbus. I mean, he spotted the island and called it Conception Island. It was spotted supposedly on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, which is for December the 8th, and called it Conception Island. And the Spanish were there for a very short while, and then the English came, and then the French, and there was a lot of back and forth squabbling between the couple indigenous people on the island, and who never really accepted being governed by the French. So we were going back and forth for a while, and then the English got involved. And in one of the deals made, Grenada was pretty much given to England, and then it became a British colony. But even while we were a British colony, there was always that taxation without representation. So as tiny as we were, that whole concept kept coming up. There were quite a few people who argued that we really should not be paying taxes because we had no representatives on the island. But later we were given all the representatives that we need. Some from, Jamaica, kind of doubled up to Jamaica and Grenada. And we were a British colony until 1974. And then we got independence from England. And the independence, we kind of lost our way, I would say, in that we really did not have the type of leaders who would keep us on the right path. So that's why by 72, no, this is 74, by 72, this little group started figuring we need better government, and that's when my brother got involved. And between 74 and 79, there was this coup that ousted the Prime Minister Gary. And right after the coup took place, then we ended up best friends with Cuba, and then the Soviet got involved. So we were pretty much jumping from one bed to the next. I mean, in search of trying to find our identity, because we're so tiny that what works in London does not work in such a tiny island. But somehow they tried to make it work, and then Grenadians tried to see if they could sort it out themselves. So the revolution and all that was part of them trying to find their way. But we've confronted pretty much the French, the Spanish, the British, and then I'd say lately the Americans.
The Americans.
The Americans.
So what's the status, the political situation in Grenada today in 2014?
We are back to being a democracy. Every 5 years we have an election, and we still have the parliamentary rule that the British instituted, so we always have a paid opposition. But for now, it's stable, I would say.
Okay.
Now it's stable.
And you mentioned during the time of upheaval there from 72 really to 79, your brother got involved. Tell us a little bit about Teddy, who he was, and how and why did he get involved in this revolution during that time period of 1972 to 1979?
Okay. I would say Teddy was someone who tried lots of different jobs. I mean, he was a teacher, he was a nurse, he was an insurance salesman, he was a prison guard. And it's not until he started writing for that newspaper. He was the editor of that newspaper of this newly formed group, the Jewel Movement. He really found something that he liked. And believe you me, he wrote. And wrote a lot about what was going on in the island, what was going on with our prime minister. And I think lots of people were kind of getting upset that he was not keeping his mouth shut. And so it was easy for him to join that group and become like an activist, I would say, against what he thought was wrong, more than really a politician or a political figure. Yeah.
And during that time that Teddy was involved, as you were saying, there were basically two political parties at that time that were kind of the warring factions there on the island.
Right.
Who were those parties, and what did they stand for? What were they trying to achieve during this time of revolution?
There were the Grenada United Labour Party, and this was founded pretty much by the Eric Matthew Gary. He had gone to Aruba and was really influenced by what he saw there with unions, and he thought he could come back to Grenada and bring some of that in. Now, keep in mind, Grenada at that time had what you'd call an upper class, and then there was the rest, because we came off from slavery, and so you had a few people owning quite a bit, and everybody else worked for them. So Gary thought this was a chance for him to change Grenada. Wages were, horrible, and you either worked on the plantations for the estate owners, or you got a job with government. Well, in such a small place, it was easy for you to not get a job with government simply because you were not a supporter of the government. Now, the Grenada National Party, on the other hand, was probably not so much into the unions. And I thought the guy who led it, Herbert Blaze, was probably a more honest politician than Eric Machagiri was. So, but in terms of goals for Grenada, I don't think it was much more than finding jobs, keeping people employed, and keeping the tiny island running. There was not a big lofty goal as to what the GNP was trying to accomplish or what Gary was trying to accomplish.
And it's interesting when we think about countries today, societies today, a lot of societies and a lot of countries and nations and governments are still sort of having this back and forth with their people today, no matter where they are, what part of the country they may live in, what part of the hemisphere the country is located. We still have this issue about making sure everybody has an opportunity to work and live and be able to provide for themselves and their families.
And that was just one of the big problems that we found with such a small population. Everybody kind of knew, who supported which party. And so victimization was a very serious problem on the island. So it's just that one party was more guilty than the other.
You mentioned Prime Minister Gary. His name pops up quite a bit in this book, and you've touched on some of his role in this revolution during the mid to late 70s. Can you tell us a little bit more about him and what ultimately happened to him as a result of this revolution?
Well, Gary was, like I said, he was a trade unionist, I think he would call himself, and he came back to Grenada, and he was all bright-eyed and willing to change Grenada into what he wanted it to be. To be honest, I don't think he had the education needed to do some of the things that he wanted to do. He's probably somebody who did not attend high school. So he had all good intentions, but he depended on other people to accomplish what he was trying to do. And as the political landscape changed, he moved towards the most unscrupulous characters he could find. And you'd see my brother mentioned in the book the Mongoose Gang. These were guys who were responsible for eradicating mongoose on the island. But he thought if I could bring them in as the real roughnecks, they could just rough up a couple people here and there, and that would consolidate my power. So even if he was elected, and lots of times by, landslide election, he still resorted to those characters to maintain law and order. And I think that's where Gary lost his way. He could not see that he did not have to go that route in order to remain an effective prime minister or chief minister.
And that's mentioned, I think, in the book on page 59, where you talk about, or Teddy writes about, that the irony of the situation that was while Gary presided over a popularly elected government that held 13 of the 15 seats in the lower house, he would entrust the safety of his government to only those loyalists who were prepared to use illegal, immoral, and extremely barbarous means to help him maintain his grip on power. So, despite the fact that, as you mentioned, he had sort of the popular vote in some respect, he felt threatened and felt like he had to go, maybe above and beyond what needed to be done in terms of what would be considered humane treatment to keep power.
He really couldn't stand criticism, I would say, to some extent, and everything that he read or was written about him, he pretty much said, go find the person who wrote this and do something to them or rough them up or threaten their family. I mean, because Teddy wrote a lot, I'll be honest with you, in high school, our home was searched 22 times by the Gary government.
Wow.
And it was just to harass the family as a whole. Like your sister is trying to get to a teacher's training college, and she would not get in because she is the troublemaker's sister. So it was that type of thing that was happening, and Teddy was just getting everybody in the family in trouble, but Teddy would not keep quiet. They could not keep Teddy quiet. Right.
So what happened to Teddy, or really to Grenada, or his role in what happened in Grenada, post 1990, because your book kind of starts in 1962, takes us up to almost present day in 1990, not quite present day, but
right.
but more towards when Grenada starts to adopt and fulfill democracy as more of their central form of government. What was Teddy's role post-revolution in Grenada? Did he still maintain his activism status, or what went on with him in his life past then, after that?
Well, since he was incarcerated for 4.5 years, and he was incarcerated by the very government that he was part of in the early days, I think he became cynical. He continued to write, but not take an active part in politics. Every now and again, somebody would ask him to campaign or to come and say something, and he would. But I think after once he got out from prison, I think he gravitated towards church a whole lot more, and he did what he could. He taught at a vocational school. He continued to walk the land, but he had kind of got out of politics to a great extent. And so he noticed his friends who were involved, and he still would mention where they went wrong or what they could have done differently. But I don't think he was in the political arena. So he was a little disappointed with the democracy that we ended up with and the democracy that we still have. There are a lot of people that's in there, but it's not for the good of Grenada. And he would say that, but he was not on the pulpit anymore touting that, no.
He didn't have that open platform like he had during the revolution.
No, and I think he shied away from that, yes.
I wanted to ask you stylistically about the book. One of the things that readers will notice when they look through here is that there are certain sections that have footnotes put at the bottom.
Right.
Were those footnotes that you added into the manuscript in terms of after you read through those binders, details that you knew needed added, or where did those footnotes come from?
Most of the footnotes my brother had in his writings. There might be maybe one or two that we felt we needed to clarify, but most of the footnotes, it's from his writings.
Okay.
If he felt that he needed to make sure you understand, then he put a footnote.
So did it definitely for emphasis.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
At the beginning of the book, there's a poem by Derek Walcott called A Sea Change.
Right.
Can you explain why that was put at the beginning of the book, or why you decided to include that in the book?
Well, the poem was something that Patrick stumbled on. And I think he read it, and
Patrick was your publisher, right?
My publisher, Patrick Grace. And he said to me, he read this poem and he thought it was, appropriate. And then it was for somebody from St. Lucia. And we all know Derek Walcott is probably the most known poet in the Caribbean. And I read it, and I just thought it said what needed to be said. That there is a change in government, but so many things will not change. It's like the color of the sea, that will not change, or the bellow of the bull, as he said. It remains the same. So we're optimistic that things would change with government, but after a while you realize there's not much that will change. And so the poem was appropriate to kind of set the tone for the book.
And then towards the end of the book, there's an article by Thomas E. Ricks. Why was that included towards the end of the book, and what did you hope to emphasize by including that?
That article was something somebody gave to me when I lived in Texas. And I had no idea that my brother was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And even when I turned the article over, it didn't dawn on me that it was a front page article. And that somebody was actually from the Wall Street Journal was actually in my tiny little village in Grenada interviewing my brother. So that was one of the reasons why I thought Grenadians need to know that Teddy was on the Wall Street Journal's front page. But also, too, because you look back and realize that this article was in 1986. Mm-hmm. And if you change the date and put 2014, everything there still applies. But really, it tells you that we are kind of going around in circles, but we are not really making a whole lot of progress. So I had to put it so that you could read 1986 and somebody'd have to say, holy cow, this is still the situation we are in.
And in fact, there's a little snippet of the front of Thomas Rick's article on the
Right.
front cover. And I think the opening or the lead into this article says a lot about what your brother experienced in Grenada. It says, in his 42 years, Teddy Victor has gone through colonialism, radicalism, Marxism, revolution, and 4 years of imprisonment in search for freedom and the truth. And I think when you think about being on the island during that time of upheaval in the mid to late 70s,
Right.
that says quite a bit.
Quite a bit. And in all the struggle, I guess he died without accomplishing a lot of what he hoped to see happen in Grenada. A lot of what he hoped to see did not come to fruition. But the book is really so you could read and realize that we are still in a quagmire in Grenada, and that lots of people have tried, and that Teddy's just one of those who's tried, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We still have a long way to go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have family in Grenada? And if so, how often do you get back to Grenada to see them?
I have 2 sisters and 1 brother back there. And I go back often because some of what Teddy hoped to see happen in my little village, I kind of see it as though I have to make it happen. So I go back there and do what I can. We're maintaining a little garden, all the things that he wanted Vincennes to be a special place. So I am doing what I can to make Vincennes a special place, and so I go back as often as I could. So.
And I know you've had a lot of success so far with the release of this book.
Right.
You've had a launch party or a release party down in Grenada.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how that went, and I know you've got some other book launch events in other cities throughout the United States, concentrated on areas where there's a large Grenadan population. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Right. Well, in Grenada, we invited lots of people, and the press showed up. The former prime minister showed up because he was a good friend of Teddy. The current prime minister didn't. He was not a good So that tells you in a nutshell, the former governor general showed up also. The current did not. So, but it was more a party for friends and family to celebrate that finally this book is finished. So we took the opportunity for the press to come in and show the copies of the book, show us having a good time, and show us really getting Teddy's take. I had to get on the TV so I could let them know that I think every Grenadian who wants to teach the next generation should at some point read through this book. And so it would give you a different perspective. So we use the launch not just for the publicity, but also to just celebrate, because this was a big deal. And we celebrated on this Saturday at the University of West Indies. That's a little off campus. And then on the Sunday, we went back to Vincennes, and lots of the locals came there, and we sang all his old favorite songs, did a little karaoke, and it was actually a lot of fun.
That's great.
A lot of fun.
And you also have book launch events scheduled in Brooklyn, New York, and Toronto also,
right.
correct?
We're going to, Toronto, hopefully everything went well there, because this is a Caribana weekend, so it goes from Saturday, and it's a holiday there today. So by tomorrow, I'll know how things went. But one of the bookstores there was going to carry the book, and so my sister-in-law wanted more copies, and it was well received there. Now, Brooklyn is the biggest Grenadian community, so that one takes a little more planning. But I think once we get the word out that it's available on Amazon and that there's different numbers to call to get a copy, that I think we still operate a lot of word of mouth, or you call your friend and then they'll tell you all who else needs a copy. So we expect to do pretty good in Brooklyn also.
Good. That's terrific. And in our final moments with you, Barbara, as we talk about this excellent book, Deception on Conception, Teddy died in 2008. If he were alive today, what do you think he would think about having his stories and his experiences put in a book for Grenadian people and others to read about the experiences in that time from 1962 to 1990? What do you think he would think about that?
I think he would be thrilled. I mean, he would say, finally, I've been writing for a long, long time, and finally it's in print for other people to read. I think he would not be able to contain himself. I mean, because it really was a lot of work over the years, and a lot of detailing and a lot of double checking facts and everything else. So it's sad that he's not here to see it, but I think on the other hand, it gave me an opportunity to include stuff that probably needed to be in the book, but after he left us, then you kind of stumble upon some of that. Yeah, so it's not that I wouldn't say a lot of it in there. It's stuff that I put in there, but it's stuff that he may have left out because he's catering just to the Grenadian community, and I see this book as much more than a book for Grenadians to read. It's also to explain why the U.S. got involved in Grenada. Lots of people would say, "Oh, you're from Grenada. That's that little island that the U.S. invaded." But really, very few people knew the true reason for the U.S. invasion. And this book would clarify some of that, because he really felt Reagan was justified in coming in, and somebody had to do something, because really the revolution had gotten out of control. And we all know it ended horribly in that the prime minister was slaughtered and 10 other people were slaughtered. And so Reagan had somebody. My brother hoped that the British government would step in, since we were a former British colony. But he's glad that Reagan took the lead and came in and freed all people who were in jail in Grenada, who were just there for really no reason at all. Yeah.
Well, it is a terrific book, Barbara, and if anyone is interested in getting in contact with you to talk about the book, or they would like to get a copy of Deception on Conception, how can they get in touch with you, and how can they get a copy of the book?
So just B Pursoo, as in Barbara, bpursue@hotmail.com. And it soon will be available on Amazon. But if you get in touch with me, I'll be able to tell you. And also there's a Facebook page that's just Teddy Victor and Deception and Conception. So there'll be more information there as to other places where it will be available. As we fill in the timeline, then more information, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, I might be able to tell you where you could find it in Columbus, Ohio.
Great.
Because as more Grenadians let us know where they are, then we might be able to make sure that they could get people copies if they need copies.
Fantastic.
So it would start with me with an email to me, and from the email, or else Facebook, Deception and Conception.
All right.
And then you Google Deception and Conception, you'll find information.
You'll find fantastic.
It'll take you to Facebook.
Great,
Yes.
great, fantastic. The title of the book, Deception on Conception, What Happened in Grenada from 1962 to 1990, written by Teddy Victor, and we're so pleased to have his sister Barbara Pursoo here to talk to us about this terrific book. And for folks that want to get an interesting insight into 20th century American history and the United States' involvement in other countries, and to find out a little bit more about that tiny island that you said that people only remember the U.S. invading and Reagan's speech to the country.
Right.
It's a great read and a great insight, and we thank you so much for coming on Chapters to talk to us about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And we also want to say thanks to our good friends at Empire Books and News here at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington for providing our studio taping space today. We encourage you to stop by Empire Books and News for all of your reading needs, and we'd like to remind you they have the largest selection of magazines in the tri-state. So no matter what your reading taste might be, Charlotte and her staff here at Empire Books and News can find what you're looking for, and we appreciate them being our host for this episode of Chapters. And if you have a question, comment, or story suggestion about this Chapters program or any Chapters program that you've seen on Armstrong Cable, we'd like to hear from you. You can send us an email to the show to the address right here at the bottom of the screen, lp4@zoominternet.net. That is the letter L, the letter P, the number 4 at zoominternet.net. We appreciate all the feedback that we receive about the show, so please keep those comments coming to lp4@zoominternet.net. And if you want to check out previous episodes of Chapters, you can log on to the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page to find out to see previous episodes of Chapters, and to find out more about the program and other programs that you see aired here on Armstrong Cable. All you have to do is go to YouTube, www.youtube.com. Type in Armstrong One Wire Chapters, and you can find our YouTube page and watch old episodes of the show or rewatch some of your favorite episodes of the show right at the Armstrong One Wire YouTube page. So we encourage you to check that out as well. Well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Chapters. Please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your